You're listening to the DC Real Estate Podcast, the podcast where we focus exclusively on all things local to the DMV area. Local investors, local knowledge, local experts. Our journey starts now.
Hey everyone, welcome to the first episode of 2022 of the DC Real Estate Podcast. I'm here with Jack Seiden and Ron Gallagher, and we're excited to talk this week about changing market conditions. Also,
Make an announcement?
Yep, let's go ahead and make this announcement.
I have officially joined Russell's to-be-named group. If you have any suggestions, please let us know, because it's actually quite hard to come up with a good real estate group name. And I'll be selling real estate with Russell in 2022, and in addition to hopefully finding some flips. So that's super exciting.
Do you have the applause button on the? Yeah.
Is that better than the? I'm glad you didn't do the laugh track. That would have been.
Oh, could have done. So this is airing the first week of January, but we're actually recording here the week after Christmas, and Ron just got back from a trip to Maine to see the family. How was that?
Cold. It was a huge snowstorm the day after I arrived. So, yeah.
So you're saying we shouldn't go to Maine in the middle of December?
No.
Did you know that before your trip, or was this a revelation?
Do not recommend. No, I have to do it every year. So they should really move Christmas to June.
or your family could just move to like Florida.
Yeah, or we could celebrate Christmas in July or something. But yeah, the combination of Maine and December is not a good one.
I think you told me the wherever you were was like the Omicron capital of the country.
The county that my parents live in would be, if it was a country, it was the third worst cases per capita. So,
how far north up in Maine is this?
My hometown borders Canada. We have a 24-hour Canadian border crossing. So if I was born like 1 mile to the east, I would be Canadian. When I was a kid, we grew up with only 3 channels. We had the local PBS station, 1 CBS affiliate, and 1 Canadian station. So when I was a kid, I would watch Sesame Street, and it would be in French.
Do you speak French? Do you speak
I can
French?
do the Sesame Street stuff.
Let's do it.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I could count to 10 real fast in French because I learned it in Sesame Street.
So when you were in high school and, sort of the early age in college, did you guys go up to, because drinking age is lower in Canada. So
yeah.
I even remember like growing up in Boston, kids would go all the way up to Canada to drink.
Yeah. And the other thing is Canadians are like, I don't know what the word is. They do stuff. Like Americans are super boring and stay inside, but Canadians still go out and do things. So there's a little town just over the border that has the same population, like 2,000, 3,000, really small, but it has 2 bars and a nightclub and all this stuff going on. So even if the drinking age is the same, there's more to do in Canadian towns because they actually do things. So yeah, everyone would drive. When we were kids, we would drive over the border because you can drink there when you're 18. And this Canadian town had 2 nightclubs, Suzanne's and Broadway Club. And yeah, you would go there. It was just so much fun. And everyone was out. And
it was interesting actually crossing the border back then because you could do it without a passport. You had a driver's license and they usually didn't even check it.
Yeah. And my science teacher, like my 9th grade science teacher, was moonlighting as a border crossing guard. So when we saw Mr. Bowyer was in the, we wouldn't even stop to go across the border. We would just honk the horn and drive right into the United States.
I was in West Texas, and they have the border checkpoints, and it was really interesting. You'd stop there, and when they saw who I was, and like some white guy, they're like, "Are you a U.S. citizen?" I said, "Yes." They didn't even ask to see my license at these checkpoints. Like, I did have a friend who told me I should. I had like Diet Coke in the back, and they pulled me over. I should have just been like, "Yeah, I have some Coke in the back. Is that okay?" It wouldn't have been a good.
Yeah, I remember we went to once when I was in college. We went to Windsor, Canada, across the river from Detroit.
Yeah.
And I think I'd like left my wallet back at the place where we were staying and forgot and crossed the border without any ID and like went into Canada and came back with no ID and like was not an issue back then.
Yeah. Yeah, it
So
was
times have definitely changed.
definitely changed for sure.
I think
Speaking of,
you're still not allowed to go over the border, right? Is it still closed or partially? Or
I think in November, I don't know what it is right this second, but back in November, I think they opened it back up, or August or something like that, where you could go back and forth from Canada.
Canada's a great country.
but speaking of times changing, a couple months ago on the podcast, I think I talked about how the market was starting to
That is not true
normalize.
anymore. That is not true.
So October and November, the market was starting to normalize. Got our normal seasonal slowdown, getting 2 or 3 offers on hot properties. Well, now that is all out the window. And
It's white hot.
yeah, so I've ran into 2 situations in the past couple of weeks. Made an offer on a property in Rockville. I think it was listed at $550, so not expensive, but not cheap either. For Rockville, and that property had 24 offers on it.
Oh my god.
And at $550, it was already priced.
What neighborhood is this?
Over in Aspen Hill.
Oh, so that's pretty. That's a good price.
Well,
It's a healthy price for that anyway.
I think the high comp in the neighborhood was 520 or 525, and they had listed at 550, so it was already priced high. And I had a client write on it, and he didn't come in particularly aggressive at all. I knew that it would go over 600.
So Aspen Hill is now 600 neighborhood. That's interesting.
Yeah, so
That was like in the 4s a year or 2 ago. High
fours. Yeah, so this one definitely, it was a nice house, but this house had actually also had just sold 15, 16 months ago for about 520, I think. Okay. And they priced it at 550, but the 24 offers is where the real insanity is.
So a couple of things and I think are driving this, I think. Some of it is a seasonal low inventory, right? So there's only so many houses to bid on.
Right. So inventory typically does drop in the winter. However,
already so low.
The number of buyers typically drops in, correlation with that. So the number we had a normal slowdown in October and November, but that slowdown's gone. Just as many buyers are back out in the market now that were in the spring.
And how much of this is driven by the Fed announcing interest rate hikes and people trying to get ahead of the rate hikes?
I don't think that the rate hikes are a driver in our market. They could be in other markets.
Do you think just getting ahead of it is a driver? People, if I buy now, it's going to be less than it's going to be in June?
I've not had any conversations like that with any of my buyers. I think we just have pent up demand because there is not enough houses. I think that there's people that have been getting outbid for a year that are upping their bids.
But why now in December? Because you would think that would be probably December, January, usually the slowest months in our market. What has happened in the last? Because November was not like this. October wasn't like this, as you said. What has triggered it specifically? I mean, when the holidays. I
don't know what has triggered it. I don't think it's the interest rates, though.
This must be, I would say, unprecedented to have demand spike like this in the middle of the holidays, right?
Yeah,
it's usually the slowest time of the year.
Usually it's the slowest time of the year, particularly the week or two before Christmas. And this other situation I ran into was in the Eckington neighborhood. And I do think this property was priced a little low, but pricing a little low in DC is always the appropriate strategy. So it was listed at $800,000, $799.
Renovated?
Renovated like 15 years ago.
Okay, so but move-in ready.
Not move-in ready, but not like any sparkly, nice, amazing, nothing.
So that should go for like mid-8s, I would think.
Well,
normally, I'm curious now to see.
I would say it wouldn't be unusual to escalate $100,000 over. Sure. But my client bid $175,000 over.
So close to $1 million.
Yeah, so we went to $975,000.
That's insane.
And we still got outbid. And that had 16 offers on it.
What I find really interesting about this too, what I find fascinating is, so normally, and the reason I'm reacting to all these, $1 million in Eckington, normally are kind of what your value of a neighborhood gets set in the spring market, right? Every spring. I mean, not that there's not movement in between, but your prices are being...
Yeah, the big bump up is in the spring market, and then we sort of level off a little bit later in the year to match.
But it seems to be happening now because I don't think of Aspen Hill as a $6,000 neighborhood. I guess now it is.
It's not.
I don't think of Eckington as a $1 million neighborhood quite yet, at least for a non-renovated house. Now it is. So we're seeing the price points being set now, which is really fascinating. So do you think there's going to be another bump in the spring, or this is just being set, or is this a really early spring market?
I think there's still going to be a bump. I think we're going to bump up through March and April and May.
I'm going to be getting $1 million for my house in Brentwood.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. Like I was complaining.
Well, maybe we shouldn't sell it. Maybe we should just hold it for another year and see what happens.
I mean, it's funny. I was been complaining for months about I can't get these fucking windows in. It's actually funny. If I had to curse on this podcast, I guess so. My contractor, so the Lowe's is like 2 minutes, from the house, and he wanted to finish the project, get done. So he was going to Lowe's like every day to ask where the windows were in. And apparently, they told him like, "You're not allowed to come here anymore. We'll call you when it's in. Please stop showing up and bothering us." So we haven't been able to get windows in for months. And for a while, I was like, "This sucks. I want to be done." Holding costs. And for a while, the market wasn't really going up. So you felt like, okay, I'm just eating holding costs and time and effort. I just wanted it to be done. And I think these windows are probably potentially going to make us $25,000-$30,000.
Just a delay in them. Yeah.
We're not going to list. Like there was a point at which we were going to list. We wanted to list in December, but now we're probably listing probably March at this point. May as well hold it back.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think we had been planning on getting 700, and we're like maybe we'll push it and get lucky and get the 725.
Now we're 710.
Now I think I don't think it's under the realm of possibility that we're going to get 750, depending when we list. And so that means during the time that we've held this property,
it's gone up $50,000.
It's gone up about $50,000.
And at the time, my interest rate is below 3%.
Yeah.
So it's costing me like $8,000 to hold this for the whole flip.
I mean, maybe we just keep it vacant for another year and wait. Although we don't want what's in style to change.
I know you disagree with this. I do think that if they keep, we've had this debate in this podcast before, if they keep jacking rates, I do think that'll slow the growth down.
Well, 40% of properties are being purchased with all cash right now in the district.
But they're not. Are they real cash or are they these lines of credit?
No, they're real cash.
Not lines of credit? Because those are affected by variable interest rates.
None of my cash clients are using lines of credit. They're using cash.
But I think that will. We'll see. I mean, that's one of those things will be fun to look back on in a year or two. I'm staking out the claim that not that the market will go down, but that it will slow growth, these interest rate hikes. You don't think so? We'll check back in a few years and see who's right.
So, Ron, how long ago was it we bought that house for your sister down in Columbia Heights?
I think it was last fall. So it's been a little over a year.
It's been a little over a year. So I'd be curious, is we should price that out and see what it's worth now. I don't remember. Do you remember how much we paid for that?
800 something.
Yeah. So that might be up 50, 7,500 grand over in that neighborhood. Cause that neighborhood's hot. And we were lucky enough to buy that property off market.
Right.
Which, really got lucky with. Was that during COVID? That was during COVID.
During COVID. Yeah. Yeah. And she bought it, vacant because the reason it was an off market deal is because it was, one of the seller was someone who I had bought a property from before, and he was like, "Hey, do you want to buy this other property?" Yeah, and I was like, "Well, I don't have any money, but my sister's interested in getting an investment property, so she bought it. So that's how we got it off market."
Yeah, so we had the relationship with the seller and his agent from we'd bought a previous property from them in Petworth, and he implements the same strategy that you do. So that worked out really nicely.
Yeah, because my theory is if he would have put it on the market, he would have gotten a lot more. If he would have just put it on the open market. So
yeah, so that's an interesting idea because it wasn't in bad condition, but like there was definitely a lot of cosmetic issues.
We had to do about $3,000 of just cosmetic repairs.
Yeah, so he didn't want to bother getting it fixed up and ready.
He needed to sell fast and he knew we would be able to close the deal.
Yeah.
So he needed to sell fast because what he was doing was he was selling the property to raise cash to do a condo conversion on a different property. And he said he was maxed out to his eyeballs as far as like his HELOC and his credit cards, everything, the repairs, he's get a Home Depot credit card or whatever for the materials. And he was right up against it. So he needed to raise that cash to be able to continue to fund his condo conversion project.
Yeah. I mean, this is sort of illustrative too, with the market as hot as it is now. And it was just as hot then. Really the ability to find properties off market and make these deals.
And he's not the only one. Like the College Park property that I own, the seller was like, "Hey, do you want to buy the property next door?" Yeah. So we get
that's really the value of relationships, right? None of those were, because it was like about off market. They weren't really like, it wasn't like you sent a million mailers. It was just more personal connections than anything.
Yeah,
exactly. Because Russell and I close a deal without too much drama, and like there's not question of like, is the financing going to fall through or whatever. So we make the deals actually happen and we close them, and those sellers know that because of previous transactions with us. So we get the first chance, like the first right of refusal or whatever the term is.
And that's really what's key, because you hear how to find off market deals, you hear all these things, you send out mailers, but really it's being able to find one or two deals and then kind of have your name out there as someone who is capable of closing, makes it no drama. One of the things I think I've had a reputation for now is I don't think we've ever had any holdups. Like we've been able to go. I think we closed one deal in 7 days. So that's really what the value is. It's not marketing. It's really just building those relationships with people over time.
Absolutely.
Well, you look at some of these situations too, where you get like 5 offers from someone, right? And the agent and the seller are looking at who should I take. So I specifically remember when we closed that first property with Phil, I remember telling his agent, Kendall, like, look, we're not going to be a pain in the ass. We're not going to beat you up on inspection, right? So there's some buyers and agents out there want to nickel and dime you for everything, and they make it impossible to get the deal closed, and then no one wants to do business with you again, right? The easier we can make a transaction on the other side increases the probability that in the future they're going to want to do business with us, and that happened on this specific transaction.
And vice versa, like you said, since they aren't nickel and diming us, we are open to doing a second transaction.
I know there's a specific brokerage I'm not going to name that every time I've done a deal with them, they've just been a pain to deal with. And so all things, obviously if they have the highest number, I'm going to take it. But all things being equal, if I have 2 offers, one from this brokerage and one from one that I haven't had that experience with, on the margins, I think, you're more likely to take a deal. And so, even not just agents, but entire brokerages who have reputations of the way they do things.
Your reputation is going to precede you in the marketplace, whether you're an agent or whether you're an investor. And that matters.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think, Ron, you had some questions for us about market.
Well, I thought since it's the end of the 2021, beginning of 2022, we could play a game for predictions for 2022, but instead of just asking you what your predictions are, I have a series of statements, and then you agree or disagree. And Russell,
we should put money on this. Sort of
maybe you can write it down, or I could.
Well, we're going to have the episode too to lean back on.
Go back on. You're right. So maybe we don't need to write it down.
This is like Russell's like guess the lines with Sal.
Okay, so we'll go around the room and we'll each make our predictions. Agree or disagree with the following statements. Statement number 1: the Fed raises interest rates more than 3 times in 2022.
I mean, they've said they're going to do that. I guess they could backtrack if
they're not going to raise them right now, right? Like,
they've said they're doing 3. They said they're doing 3 in 2021, I believe 3 in 22, and I believe 2 in 20, 3 in 22, 3 in 23, and 2 in 24. Obviously, that can change. I think inflation is going to be really high. I don't think there's any reason to think that's going to change, and I think the Fed will more than likely do stick with their plan unless inflation goes down.
What I'm thinking is what the Fed does is I think they have all intentions of, at this point in history, of actually doing the 3 that they say. But when push comes to shove, I think they're going to end up doing 2. I think the political will, as they continue to raise interest rates, won't be there to do it full 3 times next year.
I think 2 is quite possible because this is where me and Russell disagree. I think 2 might be enough. Not that inflation is going to go back down to 2%, but to get it down to where if inflation stays at 7%, right, they're going to have to keep raising rates. If they can do 2 and push it back down to 3 or 4, they may just keep it there. So I guess I'll stick with my prediction of 3 just so me and Russell have a different, but I do think it's kind of a cop-out of an answer, but it depends on how effective those first 2 are. But I do think they are going to get inflation under control. I disagree with Russell on that.
And what do you think, Ron?
Well, you both disagree, right? Because the statement is the Fed raises interest rates more than 3 times. So they do it at least 4 times.
So Jack's going with the push. I'm going with the under.
You disagree.
Yeah.
I think they're going to raise interest rates because I think inflation is going to be kind of out of control. So I agree with the statement.
All right, so you're 4 at least. I'm 3. Russell's 2.
Yeah.
So Russell's a dove.
Okay. Next one. Mortgage rates hit 5% at some point in 2022. It could be in May for a
conventional buyer
yeah, like traditional 30-year fixed.
So not investor rate. Because people always get that wrong. Like an investor rate's already into the 4s, I think.
Not investor. Primary residence.
So I'm going to say absolutely not. We haven't had a average 5-year conventional rate since 2010, I believe. I just can't see them rising that high. They have risen almost a full percentage point in the last year already. I don't think it'd be crazy for us to be at 4.25 in a year. But 5, I just can't see us getting there.
I see
At no point.
I see no way. What is it now? Like 2.28, 2.75?
We're at like 3.125.
Okay, so if they raise rates, I mean, I don't think. Let's say they raise rates 3 times. You would expect that to be somewhere in the 4s, right? They're going to be about a quarter.
Well, there's not an exact correlation between the Fed raising
Sure.
rates too and where mortgage rates go. Over a long period of time, they correlate, but over short periods of time, they don't.
The other thing, this is going to get really nerdy. I don't know how many people are going to understand this. So the bond rate correlates too, right?
Over the long period of time, but not over the short periods of time. So
there's a correlation when the bond,
there's often times where the Fed raises rates and mortgage rates drop
because of origination. Yes, but even over a year period, if the bond and because this all comes back to inflation, right? If inflation is high, the bonds are going to be less valuable. Push down the bond market, the mortgage rates. I think it could hit 5 in 23 or 24, but I don't see any mathematical way it would hit 5. I don't even think it's really mathematically possible, given that we're starting from what's the rate's 0 now, right? The Fed's.
Yeah, are they 0 or are they at 1/8?
The Fed. I think it's called the Fed's fund rate.
Federal fund. Yeah,
No, the Fed fund.
FUN.
Yeah, FUN. Fed's fund rate.
And where do you think rates are going to be at a year?
I think in general, we're going to be in a huge inflationary environment. Not like the late 70s or anything, but it's going to be just all that money that was printed up, stimulus checks and whatever. Like I know the Fed can buy it back and whatever, but I mean, I think we're going to be in a big inflationary environment, and I think at some point, might be just a week in June, but I'm going to agree with the statement.
I think they'd have to raise it 4 or 5 times.
But remember, I already think that, and like Russell,
well, they're not starting. They're not even.
Doesn't always correlate, but the mortgage rates in the Fed. But I also, remember, I agree that the Fed is going to increase.
They're starting in March, right? That's their first rate hike right now. March, I believe.
I don't know.
I don't know when
it's March or April.
I don't know when the Fed board meets.
No, I think they already announced that they're doing it in March.
But I agree with the statement because my prediction is that 2022 is going to be a inflationary.
I actually think we're going to have a huge decade of inflation. And while you just said you don't think it's going to be like the 70s, I actually think it's going to be closer to the 70s than people think.
I'm going to push you on that a little bit. I know we disagree on this. If they raise rates as much as they think they're going to, and Ron thinks it's going to be 4 times, I don't think that's going to happen. Like we know, the thing that's different from the 70s is we know how to crush inflation, right? We know how to do it. The Fed is independent, technically. It's not, you keep saying political will, but it's an independent board. They know how to their whole goal is to stop inflation. What makes you think they won't just keep upping rates until inflation goes down? And we know it's not a mystery of how to kill inflation. What makes you think that they won't just kill it? We know how to do it. Yes,
I don't believe there's any will to raise interest rates of 15%.
Well, it's not will. It's Jerome Powell wants to do it. It's not really like
he's not going to do it.
Because then there's pain, economic pain that comes with that. You have to force a recession, basically.
Yeah, but I think that the Fed's mission is to get it under control.
The last time the Federal Reserve did that, unemployment went to 11%.
It's going to be a political disaster. I'm just saying the Fed is an independent board.
Yeah.
Their goal is to keep interest rates in.
Their goal is to keep their jobs.
Well, didn't Powell just get another 2-year term?
If he raised interest rates of 15%, he'd be fired,
and then
they would get him gone.
Well, or raises interest rates. This is what you have to do.
Volcker got him to what were the interest rates like in the 80s?
15%,
and he wasn't fired.
Yeah, but he would be today because we would not accept 11%.
Well, I don't think it's going to. I disagree with what level.
Unemployment went to higher than it did during the Great Recession.
But I also don't think it's going to take as much to crush it as you do. I think if they stay on there, if they keep upping it a quarter point every quarter, I think it'll be enough.
But it will result, whatever they do
it'll be
to
a recession.
Stop inflationary pressure will start a recession.
There'll be a recession.
And do you want to be, does Jerome Powell want to be the one that started the recession?
No,
you know what I mean?
Doesn't.
So, like
Jerome Powell has folded to every political pressure put on him in the last several years, and he will continue to do so.
I think they're going to get under control.
But getting it under control means forcing a recession. So.
I think they're going to. I think the Fed has enough independence, which I guess you disagree with, that they're going to ultimately that their mission statement is to keep inflation under control. And I think there's enough institutional, I don't know what the term is, institutional backbone there to do it.
I don't think there's any institutional backbone.
I think they're going to be too skittish. They're not going to want to to throw the economy into a recession after the pandemic and what we've been dealing with. So I think we're just going to accept that there's going to be some inflation. I think we're going to.
I don't think we're going to. You think we're going to live with 7% inflation in perpetuity or whatever it's at now?
For a while, I think.
I don't think so.
I think so.
No, good. It's good. We disagree. We usually agree on this.
I think this will be the third straight year of high inflation.
We've had two.
Well, I think it'll be high. I think it'll be like 3 or 4.
We've had too much of this Goldilocks 3% inflation for years and years and years and years and years. So it's time for.
The other problem you have is people are. Yes, a recession's bad, but it's also bad to have your real incomes falling, which is starting to do. Right? The
have your what?
People are not happy with a recession. They're also not happy when their real incomes keep falling. Right? If you have a 7% inflation rate and your rate's 2.5%, you're starting to lose significant.
And part of it might be wishful thinking on my part because I'm perfectly positioned right now for a high inflationary environment. You know, I have like $2 million something in debt. You know, that's going to go away. I can have rent increases. Appreciation's going to happen. So I'm not really a buyer right now. So I bring on the inflation. Like I hope that there's inflation.
Yeah, well, good. We disagree. We'll look back in a year. I think they will get it. I don't think under control completely, but I think it will be. I think inflation rate will be less in 22 than it's been this year.
I think they'll consider inflation.
Well, here's the question. What do you think it's been this year?
I know. I mean, it depends on what quarter. I know the last quarter came at like year over year, what, 6.7, 6.8?
Yeah, but do you know what the yearly inflation rate is? We know what it was.
Well, that's
for
not fair.
months.
You're coming out of the pandemic for the first quarter. What was it from like, it's been about 7 since everyone was vaccinated,
So
right?
the yearly inflation rate's 4.8%.
Okay.
I think it's less than a lot of people think that it is.
That's still pretty high. Normally we're running under 2. So it's more than double.
Yeah,
So it's like almost.
It's definitely high.
It's more than double what it
but
normally is.
the October reading, or October and November's reading, which was unusually high even for the rest of the year, I think is what spooked a lot of people.
That was
And
quarter. It was quarter 2 too. I think
It was a 1 month reading.
I suspect. So here's my suspicion. I think January, February, these months, they're all going to be in the high 6s. I think, I don't get exactly calculate either. When we get back to October, November, this time next year, those month-of-month readings will be in the 3s and 4s, maybe 5s. I don't think it's going to be up into the 6s by then.
I think it'll be in the 5s. But
that's getting under
month
control.
over month
That's
readings of 5 consistently would be
no, but it's going to be
more than we had this year.
It's decelerating growth. And I think if the housing, you would talk about housing, if the housing market was up, I think it was like 18% this year, maybe it's up 8% next year. I'm not saying it's going to go down, but I think you're going to see slowing growth of inflation of housing.
I know there's a delay on your windows and it's been profitable for you. It's been helpful, but I think the supply chain thing has been over exaggerated. Like I find every product that I need and it's not in an inflated price or whatever. So I think
You're not in construction.
but I think that the supply chain, the news and the buzz about it gives people a chance to increase their prices without too much consequence.
Yeah, so prices won't really come down when the supply chain issues are fixed, but there are definitely supply chain issues that are driving certain prices up.
You can't buy a new car.
Cars are an issue.
Yeah.
Are an issue because there's a shortage of semiconductors.
Right.
I'm trying to buy a new car, and every car I try to buy is sold before I can test drive it.
Sure. It might be real. I mean, there's some things, like you said, cars that the supply chain is really affecting. But I think that it gives, let's say the supply chain doesn't affect widgets, but it gives the widget manufacturer the ability to raise, and then you can just blame it, the price increase.
It's also a labor issue though too, right? I think what's happening is, I actually think some of it's supply chain. We say supply chain, a lot of it actually is a labor issue. There's not enough truckers. There's not enough. And so what you have is,
just
restaurants. Why restaurant prices up? Well, it's not necessarily. Although I think I was actually talking to someone who told me like their raw input on one of these restaurant owners for like meat is like up like 25% year over year. But in addition to that, their employees that were making $10 an hour and I'm making $15, and that's great for the employees, obviously. But that's your price.
Well, and these issues domino too, right? So we saw a domino in this instance today. There was 2,000 flights canceled because of labor issues because so many people got sick, right?
Yeah.
And so we're going to have a backup in flights for a week or two now. And it's going to be a simple supply and demand issue. Demand's going to be through the roof for these flights. It's going to cost people huge amounts of money to rebook.
And lost time, and those people, if you're not back to your office now, you're not working.
It just dominoes everywhere.
That is one thing I think that will also help the supply chain. Once this Omicron variant rips through. Most people have some sort of immunity. I also think the CDC is talking about reducing the quarantine period. You should have, I think there was a lot of sick outs. People were just sick a lot, right? So if you're sick a lot, you're not.
And it's a reduction of the workforce.
And I think there's been a lot of studies and a lot of people who retired preemptively because they're worried about getting COVID. If this variant is as contagious as it seems like it is, everyone gets it, and COVID starts to go back down to being more of a normal annoyance, but it's not killing hundreds of thousands of people, you're going to see both less people sick, less hours sick, and also probably some older people who are retired coming back into the workforce as they feel safer. I think that should ease the supply chain a little bit because it's really a labor problem. It's not really a supply.
So next question.
Some jurisdiction in the DMV passes some sort of rent control law to combat rent inflation. Agree or disagree?
In the next year?
Yep.
I suspect, I think Montgomery County may very well propose it. In fact, they still have some emergency moratorium going on now. They effectively have rent control.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting question for me because I'm a member of GCAR's Public Policy Committee, and one of the issues that we are continuing to fight is any mention of rent control. So we have one particular county council member who has proposed in a number of pieces of legislation. He's not calling it rent control, but it's controlled rents near metro stops, in select areas. And we've continued to push back on him. And, there's no political will with a lot of the other council members to do this. So there is one council member really driving this in Montgomery County. But we have been using our full force as an industry to fight back against it, both for, because as realtors, we don't just fight for our industry. We fight for basic property rights too. It's a core fundamental belief what we have.
Can we talk for a second so we don't sound like evil landlords about why rent control is actually a bad policy in addition to, like, people always think it helps the existing renter stay in the home. That is definitely true.
Yeah.
But you end up with less supply, and over the course of time, you price people out. It's kind of like a lottery ticket. If you're in that rent control apartment, you're great. But what happens over time is you see less new construction being built, you see less upkeep of the existing stuff, and it actually, and there's been study after study after study that rent control does not actually
Paul
increases.
Krugman, who won the Nobel Prize in economics,
Pretty liberal guy too.
and he's a liberal economist. He's got a great op-ed piece from about 20 years ago about rent control. I'm going to butcher his quote, but it's something along the lines of rent control is amongst the most easily understood phenomenons in economics, and nearly all economists, whether they are liberal or conservative, agree with what happens. Rent control leads to scarcity in housing, and it drives up the prices enormously on non-rent controlled units, and leads to rent control units being not being kept up. And so it creates slums. And so what happens is, instead of allowing the free market to determine what prices are, we create a supply and demand issue, create scarcity. Prices go through the roof just outside of these rent controlled areas or in rent controlled units. And, so it ultimately does lots of damage, both it even does damage to the people who are in the rent controlled units, because those become slums because the owners don't have the money to upkeep the properties.
Now, I will say one of the things we talk about free market that is a problem that I actually think the county might be more likely to address than rent control, and Montgomery County has actually been pretty progressive on this, is just need more housing, right? I mean, the people talk why are housing so expensive, why are rents so much? We simply do not have enough housing for the number of people who live in this country. And you're seeing that. It used to be a California problem, but you're seeing that in Texas, seeing that everywhere. We basically have not built because of a combination of zoning laws and also just the recession. It's 2008. So before 2008, we had too many houses for the population, right? We had more supply than there were people, which I think is the number one.
And then the
reason.
housing collapse swung the pendulum back the other way, and builders stopped building. A lot of builders went out of business.
And we have too many regulations on where you can build, how you can build. And Montgomery County has actually been very good about upzoning density, especially on metro stations, and allowing more multifamily. I suspect we're going to get some ADU probably in the next few.
Yeah, so we're always lobbying
That'll happen, I think,
for less restrictions on ADUs. There's a
you want to talk about that is for a second, if people don't know?
Huh?
Do you want to talk about what that is if people don't know for a
So
second?
ADUs are accessory dwelling units. What it is like having a little in-law suite or, apartment over your garage or a basement a basement apartment to help you offset the costs of your house, right? And so Prince George's County doesn't have them at all. Fairfax County essentially doesn't have them. Montgomery County implemented allowing them about 5 years ago. DC has them, but the restrictions are still pretty tight on them, and they continue to liberalize to allow more of them. And we keep lobbying for less and less restrictions on them. But there is also, I think it's called Thrive or something like that. There is a housing and growth plan for the next 30 years for the county, in which part of that plan is to allow more multifamily housing, which we have virtually none of outside of large commercial apartment complexes. So hopefully that passes, because we have virtually, no multifamily housing, 2 to 4 units in Montgomery
Although
County.
actually, you live is actually a small multi, effectively, right?
Well,
And it's built by
so multi can be
it's built by a big developer, but
multi.
you're two over
It depends how you're using the term, right? So it's multifamily in that it's a condo building.
But it's not a big condo. It's, how many units are there? There's probably like 10 or 12.
80 or 90?
Of the 2 over 2s?
Yeah.
That many.
So, but when I was referring to multifamily, I mean like a 2-unit property that one person owns both units and can rent out the other.
Infill.
So, for the record, agree or disagree, will a jurisdiction in the DMV pass a rent control
Define
law?
DMV.
The general DC metro area.
So I think Montgomery County, no. Prince George's, probably not. Baltimore already has it. I'm going to go with no.
Russell?
I do not see any changes in any of the rent control laws in the area. Tacoma Park, the city of Tacoma Park has it. It won't change. DC has limited rent control if you own 5 units or more. But I don't see any changes to current rent control.
I mean, there might be some random city I'm not thinking of. Prince George's County is a lot of like random small little cities that maybe they do
but
it.
PG
like,
County did try it before, and then they repealed it.
could one of the small cities, like one of those,
Sure, or like Arlington, with National Landing taking off.
I could
Arlington
see
decides
some city, maybe like Mount Rainier. Do they have it?
They don't.
I could see something like that.
you can see the chatter when if there's an election and inflation gets out of control, like I think it will, and then all the constituents are saying, hey, we need some sort of rent control, even though all economists have proven, anytime it's been done, it's been a bad thing. But
Well, you're right, because the last
average
time there was
person
a
doesn't.
big rent control push was in the 70s during a high inflationary environment. But what happened is what always happens, right? They implemented rent control in a lot of places, and it turned all these places into slums, and rents exploded.
Some of those cities haven't recovered. I mean, I don't think it was the only reason, but I think rent control did not help Baltimore, Detroit.
No, it's
St.
an
Louis,
incredibly damaging force.
Some of these cities that, they were probably declining anyway, but it probably didn't help.
So I don't think that anyone will pass
I don't think so.
the
I mean,
law,
there might be
but
some
there will
small
be some chatter, I think.
Oh, for sure. Well, there's always chatter.
So you get another question. We can do one more.
Okay. If we're only doing one more,
Go a little bit long.
then how about this? DC appreciation is flat to negative in 2022.
No chance.
No. We can ask another one.
20 offers of property. No chance we get flat.
Ask another question.
If you asked that 6 weeks ago, we would have gave you a different answer.
Right, but that's
and that
not
shows you
what
how fast market
I would
conditions
never
can
say
change.
Right. So I'm saying for the whole year, though, like January could be really hot, but the rest
No.
of the year could be flat.
What's the next question?
Okay.
What's the,
Several office buildings in downtown DC will be converted to residential condos.
they'll start the process? Or they'll actually...
Yeah, I mean, they'll start, like that.
Yes,
the
absolutely.
old Washington Post building downtown will
100%.
turn into condos.
100%, at least one or two. 100%.
Russell?
I don't know enough about rezoning a commercial property to residential use.
There are problems. I'm not do this kind of development, but I understand there are complications with, like, this is really technical, but commercial, everything went center stack. Your elevator, your plumbing, all of that runs to the center of the building. When you want apartments, they got to run towards the sides, right, to where the units are. So it's actually very expensive to reconvert a commercial unit because everything, the plumbing, the electrical, the elevators are all completely not where you'd put it for a residential building.
Well, the other thing is you're
land
going
is survivable. The land is survivable, and these people do it anyway.
You're going to have a lot of internal square footage, too, that doesn't have windows.
No, it's going to be incredibly expensive, but there'll be places that it's valuable enough someone will do it.
Yeah.
Especially if it's just like a building that was going to be renovated anyway, turned into like a modern office building, and then you're gutting the inside anyway. Then the only issue is, like you said, windows.
And they're doing I think they're doing that at Fannie Mae, right there, headquarters. They're already.
I don't know what they're doing there. I think they're
some kind of-
developing it into something.
condos. I don't know if they'll keep it.
No, exactly. They're putting it into Wegmans and
Yeah.
So anyways,
so was that agree or disagree? It was agree for
100%.
Jack. Do you think that a residential?
I'll say I'll agree that there's going to be a process started. These things take years to redevelop, so I don't think we'll see anything finished by the end of the year. But I bet there's something that's. I agree.
I also agree.
So anyways, next week we're going to be back again with Ron. We're going to talk about a lot of the nitty grittiness with his rent by the room strategy. If you guys have any questions, you want to reach out to any of the hosts or the guests, email us at info@dcrealestatepodcast.com. We continue to want to get back to our real estate meetups. You can sign up for our meetups at dcreirockstars.com. Every time we start to plan, another variant comes out. So we were planning.
It's literally I think the week we talk about it, this has happened multiple times. Then there's some other.
We were planning in the fall, then the Delta variant came out. We started planning about a month ago, and now Omicron is come out.
Maybe you guys are the reason why these.
Yeah, so
It's quite possible.
We would love to.
Quite possible.
We'd love to do a real estate meetup again. We will at some point. But sign up for at www.dcreirockstars.com. Any other? I think that's pretty much it. So we'll talk to you guys next week.
Thanks for listening to the DC Real Estate Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you want to contact the hosts, reach out to them at info@dcrealestatepodcast.com. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the show wherever you access your podcasts.